All right, here we go. You ready?
Welcome back, Thin
Ready.
Serve Podcast. I'm always ready because you want to know why? That's part of my brand is that
Ooh,
I'm always ready.
yeah, that's good. And you got that Mamba mentality up behind you too. Feeling it, pulling it
Yeah,
in.
there
You
you
know,
go.
that's you know. Actually, I was on a call earlier today. I told you about with Ron Ransom. And he dropped that line. About always being prepared for opportunities, right? And that's part of, how to be successful is when opportunities arise, you were prepared for them. And I love that saying, or there's that other one, right? Like that's, what success is when opportunity meets preparation or whatever it is, some variation of that. So
hmm
yeah. Well,
Well,
let's talk about your brand though. Come on. Let's
my
go.
my brand is an accident, right? My brand is did not intentionally start out the way that I thought it was going to start out.
Well, what
So
what do you think your brand is? What do that's
so
you know,
my brand is authenticity, right?
yeah.
Is gaining success and marching through success, but being your authentic self, right? Like not being afraid to show your flaws because we're all human. At the same time, I'm known for my integrity, my hard work, my intelligence, right? And my willingness to help others and put others before myself. I would say that is my brand, right? And people know me to be respectful, but I'm also someone that if pushed too hard will push back.
So do you think that your brand in every um facet of your life? Like if I asked your kids right now and they said, "What's your dad's brand?"
First off, they'll probably be like, "What's a brand?" No,
No, your daughter can answer this. She's
yeah,
smart.
my daughter can answer. I mean, she would just say that like my dad is uh he's hardworking.
Yeah,
He is constantly is trying to take care of other people.
yeah,
He's very strong and he's resilient.
yeah. But he can't jump anymore.
Oh no, these knees are done, man. These are absolutely done. But I
Yeah.
mean, branding is important. I didn't really pay attention to it, right? I never really paid attention to it. I remember me and you became friends in what 2020,
Mhm.
and you used to say, "Hey, man, you got to do more video." Right? You got to do more video. You got to put your face out there. You got to put your voice out there. And that was something that was uncomfortable for me, right? And I never really wanted to do that. And I sort of dipped my toe in there. I put a video out. It would get good response. And originally, Searchify wasn't supposed to have my face on it, right? Like I intended just to put information out there and be this anonymous sort of character. But then I got doxxed by a physician blogger. And so I sort of had to start to associate myself with it. And sooner or later, it became my personal brand, right? Like people know me if they know me for anything, they know me that I love waffles, right? I hate minivans. Um, and they know like I have very particular food that I like to eat and I don't like to eat. And they also know like, hey, I've shared things about my past and how I've gotten here and what those financial mistakes were and how poverty can sort of lend to some things. But they know me to be of a certain character and of a certain type. With that being said, it's just me, right? I'm very basic in the way in the colors that I wear. I'm very basic in the things that I do. I don't have the same interests as everyone else. So like, yeah, my brand is someone who is constantly learning. Now, is that helpful? Yeah, it's helpful to a degree, right? Because that branding and that association leads me to network with people like you and has provided me opportunities because people naturally gravitate toward that. But it probably keeps me out of stuff too, right? Like, because there's probably opportunities that people are just like, no, he's too public facing. Um, and again, I'm at a point where I'm not making an effort to be extremely public facing. And that's something everyone has to figure out, right? Because when you're leaving college, believe it or not, you're starting your brand identity. And especially like when we were in college, social media wasn't really that big of a thing and camera phones weren't really that big of a thing. But now your brand can be smashed right all over social media and we can Google all of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's changed a lot, right? To your point, I mean, camera phones kind of existed, but like, like I mean, everybody looked like Bigfoot in them, right? Like they were like you couldn't really, you're like, is that really them? I don't know. It's just that's a guy with curly hair. Could be Carrot Top. I don't know. It's and that's changed a lot now, right? Videos, almost everything's filmed out there today. It's online and it kind of gets there forever. Uh when you made that jump into doing videos, were you worried about that too? Because, as you said, like, you needed a little push into that. And, but what were some of the things you were worried about?
Well, absolutely. I mean, my personal thing is like who I am. I always want to be me. I don't want to be someone else, right? And part of me is that if you're talking to me, I curse, right? I curse a lot and I get motivated and what especially if I'm on a passionate rant, like
Yeah,
I
that
don't hold
trailer.
back. Oh yeah, man. I there's a movie coming out about me and there's a trailer out there and I drop a lot of F-bombs, but that's just unfortunately that's just who I am, right? And so what I realize is like I can't go out there and be someone else. And I have to be authentically me because it's exhausting trying to be someone else, right? Like I'm not an actor. I don't get paid to go out there and be someone else. And being me is the best way for me to resonate with the people that are my tribe, right? If my brand resonates with you, then you're one of my people. If not, I'm actually okay with that. And, that was tough at first because, I took a lot of abuse from some financial professionals and they came after me on Twitter quite a bit, right? Because they felt, in my opinion, felt threatened by what I was saying, or they didn't like my brand being associated with their profession. And, I had to learn how to exist in that. I had to learn with my face being out there. Hell, at this point, I think I want to say someone used me at the Jolt conference as a marketing example, right? They actually took my social media
Mhm.
profile and the examples that I have up there and my videos and things of that sort, and they use that as a way to demonstrate like good branding.
Yeah.
And my videos aren't professionally done. My YouTube channel is not professionally done. It's just me, my iPhone, and me ranting. Is what it is.
Just a professional social influencer. Yeah, I love it. Just an influencer. That's what happens
I
when you get
hate
caught up
that
on the
term.
joke. Now you knew that was gonna come up,
I knew it
you
was coming.
know?
I knew it was coming.
So for people who
But I
don't
mean
know, David
but I
loves
mean,
being
you
called a social influencer. It's
yeah, I
one of his
can't stand
favorite
it.
things.
I can't stand it. But I mean, we both exist as leaders in the current like world, right? Um, I do think that these days we do a bad job at forcing young professionals to learn how to brand themselves early on, right? And because the world is so connected, I
Mhm.
think they don't get a chance to just be them. And so that causes internal conflict, right? They're always constantly having to worry about a camera. So they can't just go out and have fun and do crazy things at a football game because guess what? It might be caught on camera or they might say something ridiculous that their employer doesn't like and it might get them fired.
Yeah. Well, um, I think that's a good one, and that's kind of being, but like you still have to manage that in different ways. Now it's
Mhm.
changed, and I might agree it's harder today maybe than it has been before, and to some degree, mistakes are maybe ballooned more and can be more detrimental than they were before. But like you can't do everything you want in every setting, right? And and maybe I'll try to lead you into something here. But, but there's clearly parts of your life or in different scenarios where you are your authentic self for that version of you too, right? Like the reality is in the Navy, you can't do everything you get to do everywhere else. But that's not, I don't imagine that at all those time periods you're thinking, I'm not being myself, but it's a version that's expected of you that you chose to be part of, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, and like the Ray Charles can tell I'm black, right? And being a black professional, there's a big thing that talks about what we call code switching. And what that means is when you're in certain environments, you have to talk a certain way, you have to exist in a certain way, you got to carry yourself in a certain way just so you can thrive in that environment or be accepted in that environment. Because there's a prevailing thought that if you don't, then you're not going to be accepted. But then at the same time, when you go back home, you hang out with your friends, you're talking to your wife, your husband, your kids, you're in a different tone, you have a different way of speaking, things of that sort. And so you quote unquote code switch. I've tried to do my best to not be in that situation, right? So, like, I am very calculated with what I say. I am trying to be the exact person that I am every single time because guess what? It is very exhausting, man. Like,
Yeah.
I thought I had to be a certain way to exist in the world. But the reality is, and it took a long time to really understand this, is as a young person, the world is going to have a perception of you no matter what you do. Okay. That is something that is inherently baked into the world. Your personal brand should be as authentic as possible because if it is not, and you try and showcase that you are someone that you aren't, you will be found out and you'll be found out in the worst situation possible. If you don't fit a company culture, it's hard to maintain that sort of perception hours on end, day after day. You're going to slip up and you're going to slip up big time. And it's better for you to fit into a company culture where you are your authentic self versus you having to be an actor every day. The job will be more productive. You'll have more enjoyment out of it because you're not constantly on edge. Like, hey, am I going to be found out today? Is this the day that the organization that says I can't curse is going to hear me curse because I really need to just curse right now? Like, those are things that happen.
Yeah. Well, let me shift this a little bit and I'll tell a quick story first, which might be helpful to kind of bridge some of this. So, my branding, was interesting. And I think you and I have talked about this before, but it was Burt White asked me, who was my boss, my last role, about a year and a half ago. And he asked me, like, what my brand is. And I said, I think most people look at me as kind of the retirement guy that writes little goofy notes with bad handwriting and little white pieces of paper and holds them up, and that's a big part of my brand. Um, and what was interesting about that is I think I was right. It's still part of my brand today. But the interesting part about that is it's probably about 5% or less. It might be even less now, maybe 2% of how I spend my time. Right. And I'm basically known for 2% of my work output in a given week. Right. And like I might even be generous on the amount of time there, even at 2% now when I start thinking about it. But it's not a lot of what I spend my time doing. Now, originally that was all very purposeful, right? Like I kept thinking about how do I build into this retirement brand? How do I become a thought leader? How do I put out knowledge? Because it was my job. I was running a retirement income research center and a retirement education program and out speaking on retirement. My job was to push this message. Then all of a sudden my job shifted and that really wasn't my job anymore, but I kept on with that. And that, that notion of how do you shift that brand is super hard to do, right? So when you look back, it's like, yeah, it's really hard to shift from that. It's hard to shift into what I do now from like a business leader, from a recruiter, from a, launching joint ventures type of world. I mean, that's the world I live in now, right? Like, this, like most of my job is management now. Like, I don't really sit in a thought leader developer of things anymore. I'm mostly working with strategy and teams and, recruiting or, lead generation or whatever it might be. But my brand is still connected to now. I do love that part of the financial world, but it's kind of stuck back on this other part, and it's really hard to shift it. And that's an interesting thing, to kind of look at. I don't know that I have the end of the story because I'm kind of living through it, but it's just a very interesting dynamic that what I do and what I spend my time on, and really where probably my value creation to the world is no longer aligned with my brand.
Well, I mean, that is a identity, that's a problem, right? Like a lot of people will know me as a robotic surgeon, right? But I'm going on to do vascular surgery, which I've wanted to do for a long time. Now, I can be known as the robotic vascular surgeon 100%. Like that's a brand shift. Surgify is probably known for being a financial literacy like advocate, an advocate for people, right? An advocate for people who don't have a voice, right? And those are things that, like, yeah, I want to be known for that. But at some point, right, I have to be known for something else. That's the evolution of the brand. And you're right. Like once something sticks, once something resonates with your core group, right? There's talk of Seth Godin and his book of Purple Cow, right? Like, and
Mhm.
he gives a example of like the
Yep.
Motley Crue folks and like really how like they sort of that marketing and their message resonated with a core thousand that eventually they carried on. Those are like the things that you really want to get into, where like you have a core group of people that identify with your branding, and your branding has to be you. And I keep coming back to that. It has to be authentically you. If you try and go out, no one's going to be able to go out and really like copy Jamie Hopkins, right? Like your whole thing is retirement. You wear Henleys every day and a blazer, right? Like I get on you all the time. Like that is your thing.
Looking
Um,
sharp. Looking sharp.
and
Look at this Henley
I
and
mean, you
blazer.
used to play the like the guitar and stuff, and you have your videos that where you're like just writing and you have
Dancing
your
to all
whole
of this.
story out, right? Like, but that is your brand, right? Like no one can do that as well as you. It's if they could, then they can be you. Like it's hard, it's going to be hard for someone to be me. We're all made differently. Now, brands that are meant to be authentic, yeah, that is the best way to be, because we are constantly, especially today, we're in an information world where we're constantly being sold something, right? Every day you're inundated with ads on social media. You're inundated with tracking from on Google, right? If you type in a search term, the first five results are going to be some sponsored link, right? You're constantly having to filter through what is authentic versus not authentic, right? What is marketed towards me versus this is actually what it's supposed to be. And people who can be their authentic selves stand out more.
Yeah.
And that's just my personal point of view. And I want people around me who can just be their authentic selves, because that's who I need. People is who I need around me. I don't need someone wanting to like capture every moment on a camera, because guess what? That's not real life. Real life is lived not behind a camera. As we sit here on a camera recording
Well,
a
I was gonna say,
podcast.
like, that's old real life. Nowadays, everything is in front and beyond a camera, and that is how we live life now, right? Like, you have to live life like there's a camera around. And I would say though, this part is true that it's very freeing over time. And I think that as you're younger, you just have more fractionalized versions of yourself. At least I did. Um, and as you've gotten to grow older, you brought it up before, like the difference between me at home and me at work, like there's no difference anymore, right? Like there used to be a difference. But the person you see on here and the person that texts you from my kid's floor and the person that calls you on a run or the person that you see walk into the office, they're all the same now. Like there's not much of a variation between any version of me. They're just one person at this point. Uh, so I don't feel that, where I used to, like, is the person that I want to be and the person that I am, are they the same people? Have I become that person? Uh, I think that when I was younger, there was probably more distance between those two, and now they're kind of the same. Like the way I interact with my kids, not terribly different than the way I interact at work, right? Like I'm kind of the same, just Jamie around all of that now.
No, that makes sense. And I think there's another aspect that we don't talk about with personal branding is your network should reflect what your brand is. And if it doesn't, you have to ask yourself, what does the world see me as, right? Because your network is going to be a collection of people who navigated or interacted with you because of your brand. So
Yeah.
if you're like, man, there's some people in my network that I don't agree with, you have to ask yourself, well, why did they navigate to me? Why did they attract to me? Because my brand is resonating with them. That's why we networked in the first place.
Yeah, and it might be parts of it. So this is a great conversation piece that I probably won't say everything I'm thinking about, but one of the if there's one core feature of my own personal brand that I at least personally have cared about, and I know you do too, which we connect on this piece is our ability to grind things out, right? That like you'll say the same thing. Like you're not going to lose to anybody or anything out there because you're not going to give it enough effort, right? Like that's not going to be you. It's not me. It's why it's 11:06. We both went to work today and we're on here recording a podcast, right? Well, look, there's a lot of people that went to sleep already. Right. There's a lot of people that had we said, hey, you want to do a podcast, we're going to record between Sunday nights and Monday nights at around 10:30 at night, you want to be part of the podcast, and they're going to be like, no, I don't want to be part of that podcast. Right. There's a different mentality that comes with grinders and people that have, in my view, that grit. And I see a lot, and I'll be honest, like there's a lot of people that don't have it. I see it all the time that you say, hey, did you get that done yet? And they're like, oh, no, I didn't get it done yet. And you're just looking and you're like, that's 30 minutes. Like, you should have found time for it. Like, should have found time for it. And, I see that all over the place. And I think to me, when I look at a lot of really successful people, that's a trait I see in a lot of them. We've mentioned a couple of these people on here. I pick on Ron Carson a lot on this stuff because, I got to watch him grow and develop. I mean, Ron was a grinder. He was driving a truck around the state of Nebraska delivering pies and selling Medigap policies back in the 80s, right? Like, I mean, and sacrificed a lot to get where he was, right? Like, I mean, that wasn't a glamorous thing. I mean, he was driving from northwest Nebraska to southeast Nebraska in the same day to deliver two pies to two people that might, net $100, right? And he was a grinder. Jason Wank, who you mentioned before on here, right? He's a grinder. Like he's working all the time, right? He's always thinking about new things. He's pushing hard. He's challenging the status quo. Uh, I feel the same way about you, right? Like if you're not at work or with your family, you're reading, you're diving into something, you're listening to a podcast, you're going down the rabbit hole, right? I mean, it doesn't just mean like, sacrificing everything in your life because you're very purposeful about being around the kids and Kim and the family, but you're a grinder. And that, like, I appreciate that about, all of you, right? You're not the only ones, but I picked on you because you've all shown up in the show before. But I know a bunch of other grinders. That's why I love Brian Money. I'll call him out. Like Brian Money's a grinder, right? Like he works hard. If I ask him to do something, he gets it done. And a lot of people know him from FinSurf too. But like I appreciate that about Brian. It's one of the traits that made me want to bring him on board when I hired him first.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Like work ethic, right? Like I think everyone like who really wants to be successful, a part of their brand just needs to be like they will just get shit done, right? And the what I mean by that is like you can like some people believe that intelligence is genetic, right? So you're just naturally born smart and you can learn things. Well, work ethic is one of those things that, like, that's not a genetic thing. That's like you just want it more than someone else, or you just want to get there. You have a desire to get there.
Mhm.
Like, and that is something that is nurtured over time, right? Like, you can work your way to success. You can grind your way, right? Because no matter what it is, there's a learning curve associated with it.
Yeah.
And you can either be naturally gifted and it puts you higher on your curve, or you can say, like in basketball, you know what? I know I'm not a good shooter, so I'm gonna get 1,000 makes this summer, and I'm gonna shoot from it, and I'm just gonna shoot, and I'm gonna shoot, and I'm gonna shoot, and I'm gonna shoot till eventually my learning curve is exceeded, and I just outwork the person next to me, and
Mhm.
that's how I got into the game, right? Like, I relied for a long period of time, because I did not know I was smart, on just my work ethic. I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna get there off of here, so I'm just gonna outwork literally everyone, right? Like, that's how I'm gonna stand out, because I realize that most people don't work hard. So that's part of my personal brand. Like, cool, you want to sleep 10 hours? I'll sleep 6. And I
Yeah.
that means I can get 4 extra hours of work in before you show up. You want to show up at 9 a.m.? I'll show up at 7 or 6. And so I've already been there working for 3 hours. So I'm ahead of the game. And that's part of my brand. You have the same thing. Like, hey, well, everyone, while everyone's asleep, we're working, right? Like, we're up earlier. We're doing the things that other people don't want to do. And I think more and more people can differentiate themselves and differentiate who are they in their brand, by just adopting that one thing.
Yep.
Like, learn how to be gritty in your approach, because guess what? You don't have to be the smartest, you don't have to be the most handsome, whatever. Um, but like, if you have the best work ethic, that can overcome so much, right?
Mhm.
Being inquisitive and just having the best work ethic out there will get you hired every single time.
Yeah. Well, and there's, I think about two of the best advisors at Carson I got to work with. Jamie Carroll is just a grinder. And she's, she worked harder than almost anybody. I always tell people, like, I don't run into very many people that at least work at my pace or outwork me. And she's probably one of them that's right up there. And then Debbie Taylor, who's is pretty well known out there in the industry too, as a speaker, but like, I got to interact with her a lot this summer. And I mean, she's doing 75 million different things every day. And it's amazing, like the pace that she's able to keep and the different areas that she's able to jump within. And, that's one of the things I looked at in my new team at Bryn Mawr Trust. Like, who are the grinders? Who are the ones that, are doing extra, are carrying a team, are, creating their strategy deck when they don't have one, and not looking around saying, "Hey, my old boss didn't give me a strategy deck." Well, you were in charge, right? Yeah. Well, then, like, where was your deck? And I hear that a lot from people out there in the world. Like, if you get started, I'll give this example too. When I got started, was, I got started at teaching, and like, we didn't have a layout of where to go get published and how to get published and support for it. So I just started doing it. Like, I looked it up. I went and talked to professors at other universities, and I just started doing it. And then my dean loved it, but he wasn't going to give me a strategy for it. If I didn't do it, he never would have, right? And so you just had to, like, I had to say, "Hey, I think this is useful for myself. I'm going to go figure out how to do it and then go do it. I'm not
Yeah,
going to
that's
wait."
called being proactive,
Yeah.
right?
You know?
That's called taking a proactive approach. What most people don't realize is majority of people are not proactive, they're reactive. They need someone to tell them what to do. People
Yep.
who are grinders, people who have a like immense work ethic, they're not waiting for other people to tell them what to do, because they're like, if I just get this work done, I can move on to something that I want to do.
Yeah. But, and that's been a frustration for me. I think as somebody who comes from that mentality, when I look around at people and then, I've managed people, and I still need to improve on this. So I'm not going to abscond my own faults here or whatever, too. But, that's why a lot of people need managers. They need help with that. They need structure. They need direction. But I do get frustrated sometimes when I look at people and they come back and they say, "Hey, nobody told me what to do." And it's kind of like, well, yeah, like, but that you were put in charge of it, right? Yeah. Well, like you were supposed to figure out what to do. Like that's the whole point of being in charge. Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of being in charge, but the reality is it took me a long time to realize that most people don't know how to make those decisions.
yeah.
And so what I would tell young folks is like, man, like before you start thinking about anything else, the baseline of what you need to include in your like personal brand is that you will work harder than everyone else. When you get to a point where the amount of effort you need to put in is asymmetric to get that outcome, that's when you can sort of tailor your work to scenarios that allow you to get an asymmetric outcome. Like early on, you mentioned Ron was just a grinder, right? Now he doesn't have to work as hard to get a large outcome because all of that effort got him to a point where now he understands a little bit of effort here or maximum amount of effort with this small thing gives me a great outcome, and he can sort of scale back. But until you get to that point, you just got to grind away, man. Like in medical school for studying, I put in the hours. And I remember there was a test. I was the first one done, and I think I got a 98 on it, right? And so this kid in my class, he comes up and he's like, man, he's super excited. He's like, man, you see, I got this. I must have got the highest score in the class. And he had like a 94. And he was like, man, what'd you get? And I was like, oh, I got a 98. And he was like, no way, man. How'd you beat me? I was like, I put the work in and I just walked off, right? Because what I was known for in medical school is I showed up Monday through Friday and I put in 12 hours of studying a day in the same spot in the library, so much so that like the impression of my butt was probably in that seat because I sat there every day, right? Like, but people knew that I put the work in,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, yeah, I'm going to beat other people because I outwork them. Now, maybe my intelligence isn't 100% up to snuff with them, but I can level the playing field by just working hard. And that's part of my personal brand.
Yeah. And that's that Mamba mentality, right? Right
Mamba
there.
mentality. I'm not losing.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I appreciate your drive and your effort and you grinding it out with me here tonight and doing this episode. I know you gotta be back in the grind tomorrow, so I won't keep you here any longer. But appreciate you, my friend, and
I
you know,
appreciate you.
hopefully we will you know uh come up with a cooler brand for you than waffles and broken Teslas too. Because I mean, to be honest, when I asked that back at the beginning, like if you just asked me, I'd be like, I don't know, the guy likes like burnt like batter and broken down cars. So like that's basically his brand to me is waffles and broken cars because they don't work.
Waffle connoisseur, man. Waffle
Yeah,
connoisseur.
waffle connoisseur, burnt batter connoisseur. That's who we got here. Just burn up that batter, get it nice and crispy, so you lose all the fluffiness and flavor. And just burn it. Yeah.
Whatever, Mr. Scrapple.
Oh, scrapple is delicious. Don't badmouth our southeastern Pennsylvania delicacy. All right, appreciate it,
All
man.
right,
See
brother.
everybody later.
All right. Peace.